we can show Putin that time is not on his side. He may be singularly single-minded. He may be focused, but it doesn't matter. He doesn't have the power to achieve everything he wants. If we would wake up and realize that our hand is not all that bad, we do have leverage.
Earlier, we were hearing the US President Donald Trump in the Oval Office meeting the Norwegian Prime Minister and the former Secretary General of NATO, who is also a Norwegian politician, and talking about Russia's overnight attack on Ukraine. Donald Trump condemned it as very bad timing, adding, "I am not happy." On social media, he had spoken directly to Russia's President Putin, saying, "Vladimir, stop. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done." And in that Oval Office meeting today, he's been speaking in the last hour. Donald Trump said he wants to get a deal done within a week.
Last night, I wasn't happy with it, and we're in the midst of talking peace, and missiles were fired. And I was not happy with it. That's what I meant, and that's, what it said. I assume that's what you mean.
Sorry,
yeah,
if the bombs keep falling, will you consider additional sanctions toward Russia, or what will you do if President Putin does not
I'd rather answer that question in a week. I want to see if we can have a deal. No reason to answer it now, but I won't be happy. Let me put it that way. Things will happen.
And the president also hinted again that Ukraine might have to be prepared to lose Crimea.
When you say Crimea, that was handed over during a president named Barack Hussein Obama. That had nothing to do with me, Crimea. That was 11 years ago with Obama. And they made a decision. There wasn't a bullet fired. There was no fighting. There was no anything. They just handed it over. Now they say, well, can you get it back? I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. That was given by Barack Obama when he was president, not by Donald Trump.
Yes, well, there is Donald Trump talking about 2014 and that moment when Russia annexed Crimea. At that time, it's been explained that Ukraine had very little military force. It was in a state of chaos because there were lots of protests going on and appeals to get closer to the EU. There was a leadership crisis at the top with the outgoing president being replaced by a new one. So they were not in a position really to fight. Daniel Fried, a former US diplomat and US Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, joins us now. Daniel Fried, it is hard to predict what might happen next, but interestingly, Donald Trump seemed to put a timetable there on peace talks, or at least the next moves. What do you anticipate?
You're right. It's hard to predict. I'm glad that President Trump finally started directing some of his heat in the direction of Putin. But he needs to do more than just say he's unhappy. He needs to actually put pressure on Putin. Now, in the quotation you played, Trump suggested he might put pressure on Putin. But he needs to do it now and not just talk about it. Moreover, all of this talk about the U.S. recognizing Russian annexation of Crimea doesn't do anything to help. It convinces Putin that we're suckers and weak and desperate for a deal, and that encourages him to continue his attacks against Ukrainian civilians. So we, the U.S., and the West generally need to muster our resources, which are considerable, stop throwing flowers at Putin's feet, and that's a problem for the U.S. right now, and back Ukraine until Putin is in a more reasonable frame of mind and is ready to make a deal rather than just collect our concessions.
We were talking to Cathy Ashton, major diplomat for the EU, who has had face-to-face talks with Vladimir Putin. And she said that he is single-minded. He knows what he wants. He wants his legacy. He does not want to be the Russian leader that has lost Crimea after almost seizing it back. What is there to say that he will agree to any sort of ceasefire deal, even if there is some more pressure put on him?
Well, Russia is not in a particularly strong situation if the Trump administration would wake up and realize that. Their economy is hurting. The only upside of Trump's playing around with tariffs is that the price of oil has gone down, which deprives Russia of a lot of currency because oil is its largest export commodity. So we have leverage against the Russians. We can help Ukraine arm itself. The British-French-led deterrence force is actually a great thing, and I would accelerate the planning to deploy that. We can show Putin that time is not on his side. He may be singularly single-minded. He may be focused, but it doesn't matter. He doesn't have the power to achieve everything he wants. If we would wake up and realize that our hand is not all that bad, we do have leverage, we can come up with a pretty good deal for Ukraine and for ourselves.
If Trump does walk away from the talks, as he has threatened, how should Europe respond, do you think?
Well, walking away from the talks is one thing. He could walk away from the talks but decide to back Ukraine. But I think what you're asking is, suppose he decides to walk away from Ukraine altogether. And in that case, Europe is going to have to stand up in a way that it has not done in decades. Europe has differed with the United States before, but they have never had to deal with key issues of European security without the United States. That is new territory. And I'm not particularly proud of my country that we're hinting that we could back away from Europe. Terrible mistake. But if Europe is faced with the prospect of Russia seizing Ukraine and then proceeding to put pressure on the Baltic states, on Romania, and perhaps even Poland, Europe is going to have to muster the resources to continue to support Ukraine. And I would not give up on the United States. I've noticed that here, there has been a lot of pushback, including from Republicans and the right part of the rightist half of the political spectrum, against some of the stories that Trump is prepared to recognize Russian occupation of Crimea or prepared to damage or even abandon Ukraine. There is some pushback, so I wouldn't count us out yet.
It's interesting. We heard Marco Rubio saying we've shown them, meaning both sides, the finishing line. They just need to say yes. And Donald Trump saying it takes two to tango. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's very interesting. We're talking, obviously, at a time when there are leaders in Europe, our own Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who's in Washington, trying to strike a trade deal with the United States between the US and the UK. You get the impression of world leaders having to still tiptoe around Donald Trump for fear of upsetting him because they're all desperate to do some sort of trade deal and help themselves out of the tariffs that he's imposed. But on Times Radio Breakfast this morning, the former Defence Secretary Grant Shapps, a Conservative now freed from public office, he openly accused President Trump on Times Radio Breakfast of being in cahoots with Vladimir Putin.
You've got this terrible combination of a president who just for some reason seems to support the tyrant, and I have some theories as to why, but I may have to wait for the 30-year rule to talk about them.
Do you want to offer one now?
Thank you. I think I'll probably resist, but I don't think it's too much of a stretch, and many of your listeners will already know because it's publicly reported that he's had previous both run-ins with Kyiv unrelated to the war, and people may come to their own theories as to why he seemed to be in cahoots.
What do you think about that, Daniel Fried?
I think there is an inexplicable and dangerous fascination with Putin on the part of many people in Trump world, including sometimes Trump himself. This has precedent and not good ones. Part of the American isolationist right was fascinated with Hitler. They thought they saw in Hitler a strong man whom they admired. And as a result, they opposed assisting Britain even after the fall of France. Shameful episode. And I hear echoes of that when Trump and some of his associates speak in glowing terms about Vladimir Putin as a strong leader and an ideal partner. Now, that's not quite where we are yet. Trump has not entirely committed himself to a pro-Putin course. I disagree with many of the things he said, and I think our policy is missing a lot right now. We could be doing more to achieve Trump's goal of ending the war on acceptable terms. But it isn't quite true that Trump is completely thrown in with Putin, at least not yet. And I think that there are many in the administration who are arguing the case for peace through strength, for working with the Europeans, the French and British especially, the Poles and others, to help ourselves by helping Ukraine. So this battle is going on right now.
We've had our listeners, we invite them to get in touch, Daniel, and Michael has said, look, Trump wants Ukraine minerals and he will sacrifice Ukraine to his mate Putin for that. Do you think that that's in play? Do you think that there might be some sort of minerals deal despite what's going on now?
The minerals deal has been gyrating back and forth from something which looks terrible to something which looks better, back to terrible. It's been going back and forth. I don't know how it will come out. A decent minerals deal that gives President Trump the sense that he has a material stake in Ukraine's survival would probably be a good thing if its terms are reasonable and of interest to the Ukrainians. It's not clear to me that we will get there, but it isn't inevitable that it will be the sort of colonial, rapacious deal that was described and even leaked a couple of weeks ago. Remember that the Trump administration is, shall we say, not known for consistency. Trump, as we have seen with tariffs, is prone to wide and wild swings of policy, proposing, insisting on something one day, taking it back the next day. In that inconsistency is a degree of hope, because when Trump says something objectionable, it doesn't mean it is the final word, even if it sounds like the final word.
Okay.
I don't like being in the position of characterizing my own government in such fashion, but you've asked me to say what I think, not what is convenient or easy.
Well, you've told us what you think, and it's been fascinating. So Daniel Fried, former US diplomat and US Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, thank you very much indeed.